the sun was shining and it was a bright, warm day in the end of a summer break. You know when you have this kind of like gray feeling when you know that the summer break is going to come to an end. But I was thinking to myself, for this last week I was going to put in some great effort and work. I was really fired up and motivated, but it was combined with this empty and also very demotivated feeling just because I know that kind of like my entire summer breaks plan of 2023 had gone to shit, to be honest. And what was happening in this summer was that I was just flipping from one thing to another. And not to like get off topic or anything, I was feeling a bit grey just because I had done this during the summer. I hadn't really been focusing that hard on actually sticking with something. But this day, I was actually going out of my room towards the kitchen in my house, and I was scrolling through my YouTube and I saw a post of a guy named Hansa. He had made a 3-hour guide on discipline. How you can change your life with discipline. How awesome is that? Changing your life with a certain thing. But what I didn't realize at that moment was that this was when my life was going to turn around forever. And the interesting thing is that since I've been embracing discipline and rejecting happiness, my life hasn't been the same since that point, and I'm extremely grateful that I made this decision and that I made this happen. And so now I've actually turned my life around, kind of like when I was flipping from one thing to another, to now I've accumulated some great results. Let's jump into the whiteboard just because now you've heard my story, and now let's dive more into the results and actually the systems that I used when I started to reject happiness. So I simply copied a few guys. I copied David Goggins, for example. Probably know who that is, like ultra marathon runner. Jordan Peterson, a lecturer and also an author. Alex Ramosi, a very, very successful businessman. All of these people share one thing in common, is that they reject happiness. And the reason that you want to reject happiness is pretty simple, and we will get into that a bit later, not to like get too off topic in the beginning. But what are the results that I've gotten with this? Because if I'm not, why am I basically credible? So that was my story, as I just said. So the results that I've been getting from this is, since that point, I've actually never ever struggled with consistency in the gym. Last year, I think I went to the gym 220 times plus, and I also played football like 3 times per week, and that times like 52 perhaps. I would say on average like 3 times. In the summer it was more like 5 or 6, and now it's more like 4 or 5. So essentially I would say 3 because of sickness and all of these things. Like life just gets in the way. When you're 3 times 52, that's 156 if I'm not completely wrong. But 156 times plus this is 376 times I've worked out, so that's more than one time per day on average. And of course I've had rest days and stuff like that. That is one thing. I've also built a pretty aesthetic physique and had a great transformation. So now I do have a 6-pack, for example. I've improved my grades actually pretty drastically since that point. I have also monetized a history YouTube channel and I started that one in September of 2023, and I carried that on to like February 2024. Like right away when I started this channel, I just threw this out just because this was more fulfilling to actually talk about this. So now we'll actually dive into my system. And my system is pretty simple. It consists of a 3-step method. And first of all, we're going to dive into why this protocol is so powerful and why you should even reject happiness and embrace discipline if my story wasn't really enough. And then we're moving on to the system that you're going to use instead of embracing happiness. So this builds the foundation for kind of like what we're going to do. And then we're going to talk about setbacks and how they can influence you and what you can do to actually turn setbacks into opportunities. So, why do we do this? Well, it builds a great foundation for our future selves just because we've put ourselves in the kind of like the front seat of the car, and we're put our hands on the steering wheel, and we're actually taking advantage of like the all of life's like hacks and tricks and stuff like that, and we can actually move to a destination which is also going to have happiness as a byproduct, which not, because if you just chase this, you're chasing instant gratification, instant highs, instant hits of dopamine, and you won't really end up anywhere. And the reason that happiness isn't a sustainable thing to actually chase is because it is a short-term emotion. If you're feeling down, here's some motivation for you. If you feel like this has been your life, it just went down like this, it can also go up like this, because everything that goes up must come down, and everything that comes up must go down as well. So you have to understand these things in order for you to actually reject happiness, just because it's not really sustainable, and as well as it's not really reliable in hardship, because when things get hard, even though you're chasing happiness, it's going to be impossible to actually defeat the thing that you're feeling. For example, it can be grief, somebody in your family has gotten a terrible illness, or something just unexpected happens that you didn't really think would happen. So we'll touch on this a little bit later, but what happened to me, as I described earlier, when I rejected happiness, I became disciplined, and I got the results that I always wanted. For example, these things. And what is interesting is that now I feel happier and more fulfilled than ever before. To be honest, I'm recording this kind of like almost a little bit swollen in the face, because I don't really know why, but I'm extremely like warm in the moment. But I really do enjoy recording these videos, and today I've been on like an 8-hour lecture, like when you're a football referee, and then coincidentally I actually went from that to actually referring a football game, if that's how you pronounce that, when you are a referee and you basically just kind of like dictate the game and stuff like that. But you probably get what I'm saying here. So what is life about then, you may ask? But life is about these things. I would say growth plus fulfillment, adventure, and also, is there anything? Yeah, and a contribution, I would also say. And with these things, you will actually start to feel good. You will start to feel happy, because imagine if you were able to contribute to the community that you liked. For example, if you are passionate about like people in your country or whatever, and you're able to contribute, to check this box, and you have an adventure which is that you're actually trying to contribute to people, check this one off as well. You have, what was I writing here? I don't even know, but you know, if you're checking all of these boxes off, you're actually going to feel fulfilled and happy, even though you were chasing an adventure. And this is what we're going to touch about now, because the system that I use is an adventure. So what is even an adventure? An adventure is simply something that you pursue that is going to make the suffering kind of like, you're going to bear your suffering in a better way, simply because you've got something to focus on instead, even when you're trying to heal from something. For example, when my parents divorced, if I wouldn't have had an adventure, it would have been a lot easier for me to actually be that guy who could actually take that pain and turn it into something beautiful, even though I used other things like ventilating and habits that we will touch on later on, kind of like this. If I would have been talking to people and ventilating as well on the side, it would have been even more powerful, even though I did these things as well, because you need to heal your traumas essentially. So how do we find this adventure? Well, we start with some silence. Be some quiet. Be some quiet. What am I even saying? Be quiet for some time, and take some time to sit in silence and stare at your wall. Because this may seem a little bit weird, but ask yourself a few deep questions when you're staring at your wall. And the more you think of this, the more you're going to realize how important it is to sometimes spend some time reflecting and in silence as well. And I think the more you actually try to do this, the more you will have things figured out. And there's a reason that some people in like solitary confinement become like crazy, just because they spend so much time in silence, because it's very hard if you don't really have your mind figured out. That's just my theory. You don't have to listen to me, because I'm just a random guide about that fact, but the other things are actually built on top of like the things that I've used. So I'm just breaking it down into a very quick video that you can actually utilize. And the next action step that I want you to take is basically to write down a list of things that you can actually do as your adventure. For example, it can be gym, it can be a sport, it can be whatever. It can be like some type of craft, for example, playing an instrument. It can be whatever, like something that is sustainable, that is going to improve your life in the long run. It can be relationships, just researching stuff. And when you wrote your list, kind of like this, and you have a few things listed out here that you think this would actually be a great adventure to pursue, something along the lines of a few different things. So what you have to do to find this adventure is to look at the negative, and you might ask why. Because if you ask yourself like, okay, so we have the gym, for example, we have a sport, we have kind of like painting, we have also perhaps like researching, I don't even know, like addiction, for example. So if we go to the gym, what are the results that we will get? A skill set. We'll just write SKS, a skill set, and also some type of status. For example, it can be muscle that contribute to your status or whatever. And if we go about and pursue a sport, for example, it can be, I don't even know, but basketball, for example. We gain a skill set, which is we're able to play basketball, and we also gain some type of status inside of like the basketball community. If we pursue kind of like painting or in craft or an instrument or whatever, some type of like creative thing that I'm not personally really talented at. But you know what is really, really interesting here is that if you do this, you will also gain a skill set, which is painting, and you will get some type of status inside of the painting community. And you have this other thing here is researching addiction. You'll get a skill set, and perhaps you also gain some status. And you see, it's like every single thing that you think about right now fits into this. You gain a skill set, and you can gain some status either via a third party thing, like for example in painting. If you don't really get that good, perhaps you don't really gain that much status. In, for example, researching addiction, you might not get it right away. In fitness, you might not get your results, and you might not even gain status as well. Like, this is all dependent on like the work that you put in, and also the results that you're getting. And to some degree, it also involves a little bit of luck, but I think mostly hard work and just trying to understand this. So why should we even look at the negative? Because the positives will be relatively the same. It's just the act that you're choosing. So instead, ask yourself, what suffering do I want to experience? So for example, in the gym, it can be pushing your sets to failure. And that can, most people probably get a little bit scared of that and actually feel a little bit intimidated by that. But if you look at that, like me, and you feel, I actually like that suffering, go and pursue it. And you also have another thing, which is like a sport. If you want to like practice, I don't even know, hoops or dunks or whatever, like you want to become Michael Jordan. If that's the thing and you want to wake up early, then that's a thing, and you happily feel that you would go about and do that to get the skill set. By all means, go ahead and pursue it. And this is how you find your adventure. Just ask yourself, what is the suffering that I would happily go through? Because the real pain in life is not the pain of waking up early and trying to become the best person at basketball. It's when you're older and you look back at your life and you see that you had the decision to make when you were younger. For example, you could choose to start this business model or whatever, or you could go out and you could practice basketball, even though some people might laugh at you because you're not tall or whatever. Go out and do it anyway, because imagine this version of you, how sad and how you would question, why didn't you just pursue it? Why even care what other people think of you who don't even have an direct impact on your life? It's just your mental like image that actually precedes you to caring about what other people think of you. And I heard this quote today by Chris Williamson, a very famous podcaster, and he said, "Why care about other people when most people don't even like their lives?" Think about that. Think about that. That's extremely powerful. And just if you start with this, I promise you that you will find your adventure and you can actually happily suffer more, or more suffer more. Kind of like right now I'm doing this. I'm actively suffering more. I could be sitting in my bed scrolling, but I would also suffer from that just because I knew I could be recording this even though my phone is about to die. It's at 3% right now, but I'm going to do this anyway. And what is interesting is that once we do this, we can actually turn setbacks into opportunities. And I need to be rather quick now, even though I don't want to, because my phone is about to die, as I just said. So, emotions. Our emotions dictate if we see something as a setback or an opportunity. So what we need to utilize is Stoicism and Albert Einstein's principle, which simply says that energy can't, I don't know what E that was, energy can't be converted, energy can be created, only converted. So simply, if you feel rage right now, you can turn that, I don't even know how to draw rage, something like this. This more seems like a shock. If you feel rage right now when you're extremely angry, you can't really get rid of that, but what you can do is actually turn that into something positive. For example, it can be going out and punching a boxing bag, for example. Do something sustainable with it. And Stoicism is the ability to feel an emotion, but not to kind of like get yourself out of control, for example. So if you feel extreme rage, to go and do some breath work is an act of stoicism, because you're actually having the feeling, but you're not choosing to indulge in it, if that makes sense. So habits to help turning setbacks into opportunities and kind of like shifting your mentality is the gym. Because if you exercise and go to sport or the gym or whatever, you will actually be able to become more stoic just because you put yourself into a position where you're actually having something sustainable that you're doing instead of feeling this rage, for example. And what I would also suggest is that you have to ventilate with other people. And what does ventilating mean? It basically means that you have to talk in a way that actually will influence you so that you become more, wouldn't say happy, but would actually start to get rid of this emotion, or kind of like turn it into words so that the words occupy the space of the emotion. And to make that less wishy-washy, when you talk about something, your brain kind of like looks like this in the beginning, and once you start talking about this problem and opening up to somebody that you trust, it can be a parent, a brother, whoever you want, and you start to actually talk about it, you start to figure it out. It more or less looks like this now. And you're kind of like, okay, so now I can actually follow this along all the way. Instead of like looking at this, it's kind of like it's all over the place, right? And this is how you start to turn your emotions into, and this is how you start to turn your setbacks into opportunities. And realize that you've got so much energy when you're hit with something, when life throws something at you. So start ventilating. Don't bury everything inside of you, but turn it into an adventure and turn it into something great, because when you get out of this and you start feeling a little bit better again, you'll actually feel so much better. Your life will kind of like go like this, more like this, I would say, kind of like a J. And what will happen is that you're here right now and you're feeling this emotion and you're starting to get the hang of it, and this is either your path. You kind of like go like this, and perhaps like this. It's more like this. But if you choose to, instead of indulging the anger, and you choose the adventure, your life will just skyrocket upwards, and it will go upwards and it will go down. But in the end, when you zoom out like this, your life will look like this. It will be more like this. It will look like a very, very sustainable path that you're on to actually executing your goals and actually becoming the person that you've always wanted. And meditation is also a great thing about this. So meditation is simply when you focus on your breath. This is the first step of the triangle. And then what happens is that you will lose your focus of the breath. So for example, you will think, you will have an anticipation of some future event, whatever, you'll have a memory. And then the third step is simply realizing that that your thoughts have been drifting away, and just simply turn it back into the breath. So this is extremely powerful for you to actually improve your focus, for you to improve your mental health, for you to be able to actually be stoic. Because how this relates to stoicism is pretty simple. When you let's say somebody rage baits you, for example, this person picks on you and says you are something, I don't even know, they insult you, they give you an insult. And what happens is that you start to get angry, right? You start to get like a little bit sad, and you, instead of actually giving them an insult, you just reject that and think, oh, I'm just going to ignore this, or whatever, say that was inappropriate, instead of actually starting this kind of like war against each other, kind of like with words, when you're just throwing words at each other that won't really help it. To just say that was inappropriate, and you just kind of like retreat yourself from actually raging, and actually just going back to the moment. I hope that was a great description, but this is simply why chasing happiness in school is making you weaker, or as a teenager in general, or in life in general. So start pursuing an adventure, discipline, whatever, as you heard in my story earlier. And if you want to slingshot past your competition, you can apply to work with me in the link in the description, and I will help you out with every one of these things, and I will help you learn from my mistakes as well. Because imagine this, you have somebody who's gotten some great results with this, and that can actually teach you about it. And I promise you that instead of you needing to do this, instead of like, okay, so you're going upwards right now, and then you shoot down because you heard some random piece of advice, and then you go up again, and then you stagnate for some time, and then you go up, and then you go down again. It's going to look more or less like this, because this was my own journey, but it still looks more like this. But if I would have just had one person teaching me something, then I would have been able to actually go so much further and slingshot past my competition, because I can learn from other people's opinions. Just because now this is like a do it DIY, do it yourself video, and if I would have like more of a done for you / done with you, then I would have been able to actually go ahead and accumulate some great results out of it. And this is all I have to say for today. And if you want to apply to work with me, you can book a free call with the link in the description. I'll help you out and actually think about the things that I can do to actually help you out. And that's all I have to say for today. If you want to have like a full guide on like not mental health, but how to change your life in school, you can click the link in the description, and now you will actually get to another YouTube video of mine. And that's all I had to say for today. I really do hope that you got some value out of this video, and that you realize that chasing happiness in school can make you weaker if you don't do it like in the right way, which is essentially chasing an adventure and discipline and all of these stuff. I'm going to stop yapping now. Goodbye.